It's a while since I've been here. Years ago, used to be at this church for many a family wedding of mostly cousins, but also funerals. This is the village of Lambley, and this is Trinity Church in Lambley, and I've been asked to do a small invertebrate survey today, so this is quite a nice little thing to do. It's a free survey, not charging. After all, this church has provided for my families here for decades, probably over 100 years, because both sides of my family originated from this village. My mum and dad were also married in there. So I'm going to see what I can find. I've got a few hours. We'll have a potter around and we'll bash a few trees and upturn a few gravestones and see what we can find. Lots of old graffiti etched and scrawled into the walls here, which is typical of a lot of church. Woodbury Church, which I did a video on over a year ago, is even more graffitied than Lambley Church here. But the churchyard is only small. There's a limited mix of deciduous trees and some evergreens. There's some really nice yews here, and there is an oak just there on the border. Just at the back there used to be the village's best conker tree years ago in the 1970s. That's long gone now, and I think one or two other trees have gone over the course of time. The disappointing thing is that this churchyard seems to be mowed fairly regularly. I don't know why it's been mowed. Well, this is the first week of June. There's no real need for it. The gravestones here are all very old and unattended. And as a wildlife site, the area would be enhanced by leaving the vegetation to grow and only having one cut late in the year. Well, I've been working my way around these old yew trees that are on this western side of the church, and we've had a couple of decent species. One is boxbug, which 5 years ago would have had me screaming the church roof off, and the other species, if I refer to my notes here, Remacorus fenestratus. Now that is interesting, because the record here is only the third Nottinghamshire record, and I've had the other two, one of which, the first record for the county, was from a couple of 100 yards away in the cemetery here at Lambley, and then I've had it elsewhere since. But two records of a rare, certainly rare in Nottinghamshire, ligated bug. And I'll put photos of these species in. I haven't really got the time to show videos, but two nice species to turn up. Otherwise, there's not been a great deal on the yews, but it's early days and you never know what could turn up. I'm doing all the beating first, and then I'm going to go into looking visually at foliage. So on to the next yew tree, which by my reckoning is there. It's nice that there's a mature oak tree here. It certainly lends diversity to the species found here. It's not often you get an oak tree in a churchyard, so that's nice to see, and this oak tree has been here many a year. Not like the ancients of Sherwood Forest, I must admit, but it's a lovely mature tree. Well, doing quite well here. There's two things on this piece of mortar. One is a tiny spider. I'm going to try and photograph it, but it's Unops domesticus. The other thing that's on here is the bristly millipede. There's several examples here. I'll get you closer in a minute. And either way, both these species have been recorded from Lambley Church previously, and I've looked for bristly millipede on this church before, but to no joy. But we'll see if we can get you closer, because beware, these are very small. Well, this is bristly millipede. There's a number on here, more than what I thought. I thought initially there was 4, but the largest one is there, grubby thumbnail time this time, and that's about full grown. You see there's 2 others going over the top with it, and then one just there. May well be one down there, look, near my nail. and a smaller one here. There's some on the edge as well, but this is nice to have this species here. It's a species I expected to find, but it's a new grid square. It's not known from Lambley Church before. It's known nearby Woodbury Church, a couple of miles away. So that's nice. And I'll put a photo in here because these really don't look much to the eye here, do they? But if we put them under the macro facility on a camera, you'll see they're absolutely quite stunningly beautiful things, and quite aptly named as bristly millipede. So that's a nice find. A rather disappointing feature of Lambley Churchyard is the mowing that's been carried out, and been carried out fairly recently by all accounts. There's just been what's called No Mow May, and then it seems that once No Mow May is out of the way, the 1st of June means gung-ho with the mower. And that's disappointing because these graves are unattended, and I understand that people, or some people, may want their churchyards nice and tidy with short cropped grass, but there's no need, saying these are all unattended graves. Everybody has long since dead, and so has most of the relatives. If churchyards really want to become more biodiverse, then the mowing regime needs to be lessened. It doesn't need to stop, it just needs to be lessened. And if anything, leaving the grass and the wildflowers within that grass to grow around these beautiful slate headstones would just make this a more pleasant place to wander around in. Of course, a pathway can be mowed. A narrow pathway could weave its way around these headstones, and a pathway would encourage people to actually walk around and perhaps read who's underneath their feet. There's going to be a lot of flora here, a nice diverse flora, and there will be in most churchyards, because most churches such as this have been here longer than I've been around, and obviously probably about 500, 600 or so hundred years. So in that time, a diverse fauna has potentially built up. Fortunately, because the churchyard is kept tidy and the grass is kept low, those flowers of those plants that have been waiting and trying to flower for decades and probably centuries never get the chance to. This could become an absolute picture and a fabulous area for wildlife, as indeed can most churchyards. In terms of a habitat, churchyards in many villages are probably the only place left that habitat could be established. It's almost a ready-made habitat, an already established habitat. It just needs the mowers to be left in the shed a little bit more. They're absolutely vitally important places for invertebrates. And the rather sad fact about the trimming that's been done around these particular shrubs where I am here is that this garlic mustard has been trimmed. It's been done a day or two, and any orange tip caterpillars that may have been on here and in all likelihood probably were here now have no chance of completing the life cycle. And that's a shame that even just a little corner of Lambley Churchyard can't be left for the insects. Here's another sad aspect of the maintenance here, although I don't think this has anything to do with the church itself or the churchyard maintenance. I think this weed killing, which is done to 6 to 8 feet from the edge of the path on the left of the screen here, there's a red kite coming over. You may well have caught it just come through. But that's a real shame that the grass isn't even allowed to get anywhere near this pathway. There's no need for that amount of weed killing. It could just be cut when the rest is cut, or it could be left and maybe just a couple of feet on this bank just be trimmed. So that's sad to see. One of the problems is that there's two elements of society really. There's maybe a younger element of society that would like a lot of this to be left for the flowers and the plants to come through. Would make the cemetery beautiful to look at. But then there's another element that like everything still to be clean and tidy and cut short and well maintained. Well, it's been a decent and profitable visit. I found a few bits that I didn't expect to find, and there's a few bits that I need to identify. So I need to pull this down because it just encourages people to take a notice of what I'm doing. But it's surprising what turns up in these kind of surveys. People often tend to think that wildlife and rare wildlife needs rare habitats and only occurs in nature reserves. Far from it. You'll be amazed at what's in here and potentially what could be in here, especially when you've got an oak tree and evergreens as well. Quite a good mix of invertebrates of all different orders. But I found quite a decent list. I need to go home now and compile that list and finishing off by examining those species that need a closer look, which includes the spider that I've just beat off this holly. It's a philodromid, a running crab spider type thing, but it's pretty much yellow with some slightly darker markings. It looks quite interesting, but may well just be a freshly molted juvenile of a very common species. Might it just be something like a young Philodromus dispar, but it looks interesting, the coloration. So it's back home with this one to be grown on and identified. And there's a few more species to go as well. But it's been pleasing to do this survey, especially with me having family connections to the village anyway, and especially to this church. All sorts of celebrations of joy and of sadness have gone on in this church as a family, but this has been definitely a pleasurable visit and experience.